Welcome to Feral Folktales with me, Papa G. These bonus episodes are where I share the shorter tales, the ones that sit between the full stories on the Feral Folklorist. And if you're new to me, don't miss the main podcast. That's where the 30-minute hauntings and deeper folklore take shape. Today's folktale is Duppy at the Silk Cotton Tree. Along the north coast of Jamaica, people don't treat a silk cotton tree like an ordinary tree. Folks say certain ones have company you can't see, and if you grow up near one, you learn where not to sit and where not to lean. People don't argue about it. They just keep their manners straight and give the roots a little room. On one stretch of road close to the sea, a silk cotton grew so wide its roots pressed right up to the edge of a small shop yard. Anyone raised in that district knew not to sit on those roots or leave tools resting against them. Old folks said a restless spirit stayed too close to that trunk. They also said if you lived beside a tree like that, you kept the doorway marked, watched your hours, and didn't play careless with your rum. Ivy ran the shop beside that tree. She sold matches, kerosene, flour, soap, whatever she could keep on the shelves. Her son, Caleb, was 12 and quick with his chores. Behind the shop sat their small board house on stone blocks. A chalk stub lived on the window ledge for prices and little marks. Mr. Ellis cared for the yard. He kept his machete sharp, spoke when needed, and worked steady. A rooster named Redcap walked the yard like he owned it, and every evening he took the same branch, and every morning he crowed at the same light. People around that yard already moved like the tree was part of their daily rules. No coal pan sat near its roots. No goat got tied under that shade. The rooster never settled on its lower limbs, and nobody called it ceremony. It's just how things were done in a place with a silk cotton tree watching you. So the first odd sign came quietly. One afternoon, Ivy poured a small splash of rum at the step, the way that her mother had taught her to greet whatever might be keeping close to a silk cotton tree. Instead of soaking straight down, the rum slid out in a thin path along the trunk. It stopped at the nearest root and stayed shining there. Ivy watched it a moment, wiped the bottle mouth, and went back to serving her customers. She'd grown up with enough stories not to make a fuss over one small thing. The next day, Caleb drew a hop square in the packed yard with the same chalk. He left it neat. Its corners were true and square. When he came back, the square hadn't smudged, but the lines had curved a little, like someone had dragged a fingertip along them. There were no boot marks, no goat prints, no scuffs at all, just the bent chalk line. He looked at it longer than he meant to, then rubbed it out and told himself nothing was wrong. But before sunrise the next morning, Redcap gave one short crow. Not his usual dawn call, just a sudden sound in the dark, then silence. It pulled Ivy out of her sleep. She lay there listening to the room and never quite fell back asleep before the kettle went on. The house felt a little off, for no big reason she could point to. Later that day, Mr. Ellis found his broom leaned against the silk cotton root. He was certain he'd left it by the water barrel. He didn't argue with himself about it. He just brushed sand off the handle, moved it back, and kept his thoughts quiet. That afternoon, Ivy wrote 4 pence on her board to show the price for soap. When she turned back from the shelf, the tail of the 4 stretched longer than she'd made it and tipped towards the yard. She checked her hands. They were dry and clean. She wiped the board and wrote it again, this time watching the chalk until she stepped away. Now, by the end of the week, the signs grew harder to ignore. A thin shine of rum showed on the floor from the bottle mouth to the threshold, even though no one had touched the cork. The damp trail led out to the crook where 2 large roots crossed. Ants walked along the edge of the shine, but none stepped into it. Mr. Ellis took the chalk and drew a white line across the step. He didn't give a speech. He just marked it once, firm and straight, and nobody asked any questions. The line stayed there all week. People walking home began shifting to the far side of the lane when they passed the shop. Bones, the yard dog, would not go near the tree now after dark, and Redcap fussed so much he lost feathers, picking at himself and changing his roost twice in one night. When enough small things had stacked up, Ivy went to see Miss Etta. Miss Etta was the one people visited when they had questions the pastor wouldn't take on. Ivy told her about the rum, the chalk, the rooster, and the broom. Miss Etta only asked what time Redcap had called, whether the chalk line had ever been broken, and where the rum path ended. When Ivy pointed toward the crossing of those 2 roots, Miss Etta nodded like she had been waiting to hear that. She told Ivy the tree wanted respect, and already had it, but sometimes the spirits still tried to get your attention. She said to keep the doorway marked and handle the rum with a steady hand. No long list of instructions, just to hold that boundary. That night, everything came to a turning point. The air settled heavy and didn't move. Ivy closed the shop early, swept the threshold, and drew a fresh chalk line across it. Mr. Ellis latched the gate and sat inside with his hat in his hands. Caleb lay on the bed, pretending to sleep, and Redcap would not settle on his usual branch. He hopped up, hopped down, and muttered to himself on the perch. The first sign was a change in the air. The lamp flame pulled in tight, like someone had moved close without touching it. The second was a soft knock on one of the wall boards, just once. Then Redcap gave a clean, full crow at midnight, cut it off sharp, and went quiet. The rum bottle on the shelf tipped once, righted itself, then tipped again. The cork eased part way out, and a drop formed at the mouth, swelled, and slid down to the chalk. Ivy remembered Miss Etta's words, so she knelt on the inside of the chalk line, kept her eyes low, and poured one short measure of rum towards the chalk. The rum ran straight across the line, then turned by itself toward the yard. It moved out through the doorway and stopped in the same crook between the 2 big roots where everything had been pointing. The air in the room then loosened. Whatever weight had been pressing around the house seemed to travel back, along the tree bark instead. Redcap shook himself, fluttered up to his usual branch and settled, and then the dog lay down without watching the tree. And suddenly, the room felt normal again. Ivy pressed the cork back in tight, smoothed the chalk line with her palm, and everyone went back to bed. Morning came bright, and the chalk line across the step was still there. On the nearest root, a small wet spot clung where the rum had dried slower than the ground around it. Redcap crowed at the right hour. Bones drank water and walked past the tree without trouble. Miss Etta came by later and said whatever had been restless there was finished now. People walking home used the lane the way they always had, though most of them still stepped a little wide of the roots out of habit. Ivy's chalk mark stayed true, and the rum stayed where she had poured it. Some evenings at lockup, Ivy still poured a small splash on the step. She didn't make a show of it, and the yard stayed calm. The tree stayed quiet. The chalk line across the doorway became a habit, and nobody saw any reason to change it. A duppy is a spirit or ghost in Jamaica and wider Caribbean folklore. The word usually refers to a restless or wandering spirit that lingers near certain places or objects or people. Some duppies are harmless and simply stay close to a tree or yard or crossroads. Others cause trouble when they aren't shown proper respect. In many Jamaican stories, a silk cotton tree is treated as a place where a spirit might stay close. Folks didn't question it. They marked the doorway and kept a little distance from the roots. I'm Papa G, and this is Feral Folktales. Until next time.